All right, good morning, everyone watching on Facebook or over at www.conduitnews.com or maybe watching over on YouTube. Welcome. This is Friday, December 28th, and this is Josh Waters filling in again for Paul Harrell today on Conduit News Radio. We have a really great show for you today. If you missed yesterday's show, you can go get that podcast or go check the Facebook video out, but yesterday on the show is what we'll do kind of again today with some new interviews, recapping some of the top interviews and top stories of 2018 today on the show. And but one thing I wanted to share with the online audience right now is people are still coming on to Facebook.com/Conduit News or watching over on YouTube or at ConduitNews.com. One thing I wanted to share with folks is a way that you can personally get involved, personally contribute to the Liberty Machine here in Arkansas by donating to some other Conduit organizations. One of those that many people have heard of is Conduit for Action. So we brought up the website for those watching online, www.conduitforaction.org. And if you want to open up another tab where you got the show going, just go over there and you can see the homepage there, and you got all the recent articles. One thing I would encourage everyone to do while they're there is type in your email address right there on the right-hand side to the subscribe section. And just type in your email address, and you will get the latest in Arkansas politics. It's going to be really important during the session to be getting those emails because things happen fast down at the Marble Palace in Little Rock, and Paul will be bringing updates live from Little Rock and be doing the show from Little Rock several days a week during the legislative session. But be sure to put your email address in there to get updates. But I wanted to show this Support Our Cause section of the website. If you click that Support Our Cause there at the top there, this is a way you can donate securely online. You can do a one-time donation or a monthly donation to Conduit for Action to help support the information that is being generated for you to be a true conduit between the people and the state government and what state politicians are doing in your name. And then similarly, conduitforcommerce.org. Again, at the top banner there, you'll see Support Our Cause as an option to click on. And then again, you can donate securely right there. You can set up a monthly recurring donation, or you can give a one-time donation right there through the donation platform. So I would encourage you, as the year is winding down and you're thinking of ways you can give back and invest in the future of Arkansas, it's going online to conduitforcommerce.org or Conduit for Action and donating.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone out there. Hope everyone is having a good start to their Friday. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell this morning on Conduit News Radio. And we got a great show planned for you today. If you didn't catch the show yesterday, I encourage you to go check that out over at conduitnews.com. But what we're going to be doing today is, again, some top interviews of 2018, breaking those down and talking about those. We also have some top stories that we want to cover from Conduit for Action. What were some of the top stories in Arkansas news and politics in 2018? And we want you to get involved. Send us what you think are the top stories in Arkansas politics this year. You can text at 870-275-9799. Text us and let us know what you think were some of the top stories. Coming up a little bit later on the show, one of the top stories had to be the casinos issue. And we have some new developments out of Pope County we're going to detail coming up in the 7 o'clock hour today, and replay an interview with the Russellville attorney regarding a Pope County ordinance, and kind of previewing that a little bit. Basically what's happened is a lame duck county judge with just a few days left in office has issued kind of a half-hearted letter of support towards a casino entity to come into Pope County. Well, the citizens of Pope County passed an ordinance back in November saying, hey, before you can do that, we have to vote on it. And so now a lawsuit has been filed, and we'll detail that coming up later in the show. We'll also give you some new details on the tax task force. What did that tax task force cost just to be meeting for the last year and a half? Those numbers might surprise you, how much in per diem and mileage legislators got, how much in travel and hotel was spent, and then how much was spent on the liberal consultant that they had to end up firing. We have some new details from a Minnesota state legislator that actually reached out about this same consultant that they've seemed to hire up in Minnesota. So a jam-packed show for you today, but before we get started that, we can't forget today is Friday, so that means it is Johnny Cash Friday here at Conduit News. For those listed on the terrestrial radio stations, you'll hear Johnny Cash music peppered in throughout the show today. And for our online audience, we have some videos of presidential speeches and some other videos that you'll be able to see. So, like I mentioned up at the top of the show, we're going to highlight some of the top interviews this year in 2018. Paul Harrell had a lot of great guests here on Conduit News. And one of those interviews that really stood out to me as I was going back through and looking at some of the top shows was Dr. Jay Lear from the Heartland Institute. Dr. Lear was on, I guess, about a month ago now. And he's a scientist from the Heartland Institute, a public policy analyst, and he speaks around the country on the issue of global warming and climate change with a conservative perspective. So we want to share that interview as we highlight some of these top interviews of 2018. So here's an interview with Paul Harrell and Dr. Jay Lear of the Heartland Institute.
This story, Alexandria Ocasio, I've been calling her Crazio, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, called Sarah Huckabee a liar. This is from Breitbart's Penny Star. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders a liar in a tweet to Sanders' father, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, after he tweeted to chide the Democrat Socialists for comparing her election to Congress to the 1969 moon landing. Ocasio-Cortez responded on Twitter by saying that a fossil fuel America would take the same determination that the space exploration milestone took, meaning, I guess, a fossil fuel-free America. She then slammed Huckabee's daughter. Quote, a Green New Deal will take a level of ambition plus innovation on the scale of the moon landing, Ocasio-Cortez tweeted. We've done it before, and we can do it again. Now, this is interesting. Joining us now, I want to introduce you to Dr. Jay Lear. He is a PhD in the science, is the science director at the Heartland Institute. You can find out more at heartland.org. Dr. Lear, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Paul. A pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. So tell us just a little bit about the left. I've heard this before. The left is calling for a Green New Deal. What do you think about that?
Well, I think they want to destroy America as we know it. They want to reverse industrialization, lower the standard of living on the way to a fossil-free world. It is impossible. They are so dumb, they don't seem to understand that for every kilowatt of solar power and wind power they spend our tax money on, they have to have 100% backup of fossil fuel power plants, be they coal or oil or natural gas. They have to be on the ready for when the wind doesn't blow correctly and the sun doesn't shine. So it cannot be done, but on the way to using our tax money to continue to support more wind turbines and solar farms, we will lower the standard of living, eliminate most of the industrialization. It's physically impossible, but they will bankrupt us on the way. Now, they'll wake up one day and recognize that that is the case, but it will be too late for many, because the people affected the most are those in the lower economic levels, because their energy costs are a higher percentage of their family income than people that are better off. It is the worst thing in the world. They want to spend more money on researching green things. They want to make it impossible to provide electricity with fossil fuel, and they think wrongly that emitting carbon dioxide has anything bad. There is no physical evidence whatsoever, Paul, that the carbon dioxide emissions that have increased since the World War II have had any impact on the temperature of this planet. Everything you read that says, oh, we're in trouble, we're at a tipping point, it's all mathematical equations that were ginned up by people getting billions of dollars from the government to prove that increasing carbon dioxide is going to increase the planet temperature, and that's a bad thing. Everything about it is wrong-headed, and of course that woman is a moron. Now, I think she's wonderful for the conservative movement, because people will wake up eventually to the fact that she is a moron. On the other hand, it's sort of nice that America is such a free society that a moron can be elected to our Congress.
We're talking with Dr. Jay Lear. He's director of science at the Heartland Institute. You're exactly right. I really appreciate your sentiment. And yet, as we say that, as you are speaking the truth, sir, there are so many young people that believe. I mean, I'm 34 years old, and I remember the beginning of the indoctrination, because I used to watch, as a young kid, I watched Nickelodeon, and I remember Al Gore and Linda Ellerbee, being given a platform about, telling people about, I don't know if it was global warming then. I don't even know what it was, but I definitely knew something about the environment. You know what I mean?
Paul, you've really hit on something. Through my entire life, there has been an environmental scare. There's money in scaring people. Unfortunately, the news media, as you well know, if it bleeds, it leads. But you're absolutely right. I could give you a list of 30 things that we were concerned about, whether it's the ozone hole or acid rain or in the 70s global cooling. And when the global warming scare is over, I guarantee you there'll be something new. And as a matter of fact, the sun has been quite dormant in this current cycle. And most intelligent climatologists will tell you that probably in 20 years, the temperature of the planet will drop a degree Fahrenheit or so.
So we've got these people that believe this stuff, especially young people, especially the millennials. They're also looking now into socialism, and it seems like, okay, this whole idea of man-made caused climate change, their solution to the problem is socialism and Marxism. Do you agree?
Well, I agree that that's what they think is true, and unfortunately, if you're not aware of history, you're guaranteed to repeat it. And socialism has failed everywhere in the world for well over a century, and they don't have a good understanding of history. Thankfully, we have Venezuela as an example, and we still have Cuba as an example of socialist countries that are totally failing. But you're right. The millennials have gone through a school system that did not recognize how terrible socialism is, and they figure, why not give it a try? They see problems with capitalism. Of course there are problems with capitalism, but it's far and away the best system that's ever been created in the world, and it has raised the economic level of everybody. I mean, the poorest of the poor are better off in a capitalist system than they have been in any other. So we need stations like yours. We need publications and websites. We need people like me out speaking every week all across the country explaining these things. It's an upward battle because the people we're battling with, they buy their ink by the barrel, and the media, you're in a small percentage of the media that's telling the truth. The rest are just leaning on fear to do the wrong things.
We're talking with the Heartland Institute's Dr. Jay Lear. Now, he is the author of more than 1,000 magazine and journal articles, 36 books. He's the editor of Rational Readings on Environmental Concerns. Now, I want to talk about being rational here, Dr. Lear, because, you know, what's interesting to me is we now have the left saying that man-made climate change is causing people's homes to burn down, is causing more hurricanes, is causing more tornadoes. And what they are saying, and speaking of being rational, the media doesn't challenge these claims at all, because what they're saying is if we would reduce our carbon emissions, your home wouldn't have caught on fire. Aren't they really saying that they can control the weather?
Well, they are saying exactly that, Paul, and of course they're wrong on every count. There are actually less forest fires in the last 30 years than there were in the previous 30 years, but the horrible fires in California that we've all witnessed are caused really by the environmentalists that have not allowed us to pull out dead wood of the forest. They've not allowed us to create rules that you have to have a fire break around your home, a space where there are no vegetation, so if there is a fire, it doesn't leap from house to house. In reality, environmental rules that the left has in place have created problems that have increased the damage. We don't have more hurricanes or storms or forest fires. What we do have is more damage because people are living in those areas and not doing the right things to protect them. But everything you said correctly is wrong. They're 100% wrong. I wrote last year when the government started coming out with a new climate assessment, I wrote a 54-page document with a lot of help from other folks with Heartland to show the actual science to prove that we don't have more hurricanes, more forest fires, more tornadoes, more droughts, and that, in fact, carbon dioxide emissions have no relationship at all. Now, there are people that say, well, it matters a little bit, but it's not measurable. If it's not measurable, that you can't say carbon dioxide is doing bad things to our planet, then you might as well assume it's zero.
What do you think we might have already talked about this, but what's their end game here? I mean, I would even, if they would at least, Dr. Lear, give me a temperature. You know, can you say when will you shut up about this? Meaning, like, what does the CO2 levels have to be? What is the temperature? They can't even tell us.
No, you said the key words. When will you shut up? The answer is never, because what their end game is more government power, elimination of personal freedom, and socialism. There isn't any question. Those three things: increased government power, elimination of personal freedom, and socialism. That's where they're going. And they are so wrong-headed. They're a very unhappy group of people, and they want control over you and your neighbors who maybe are a little happier than they are.
It says here that you were featured in the 2010 edition, the March 2010 edition of Parachute magazine for setting a new world record, having jumped from an airplane each and every month for 32 years. Do you still hold that record, sir?
I do hold the record, and it extended to 34 years and 11 months. I don't like to talk about it too much because you might think I'm crazy. That's 35 winters I jumped in central Ohio, but skydiving is my hobby. My streak ended at 34 years and 11 months when in a bicycle race I crashed and broke my hip, and I had to miss 3 months of skydiving. Now, I can still break that old record of 34 years and 11 months, but I have to live to be 114. But I'm going to give it a try.
That's fantastic. Oh well, yeah. So definitely, I feel like that's great. Congratulations on that record, and
Thank you.
Really appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. You make great points, and I'd love to have you on again sometime, Dr. Lear.
Paul, I am delighted to be chatting with you, and you can call me anytime. This is what I do: try to re-educate the public and undo the damage that the leftists do, and spewing lie after lie after lie.
All right. Dr. Jay Lear, everybody, we appreciate it, sir. You have a great week.
You too. Thank you.
All right, that was Dr. Jay Lear from the Heartland Institute with one of the top interviews of the year with Paul Harrell. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, you don't want to miss this. How much of your tax money has the tax task force spent over the last year and a half to, if you'll go read at conduitforaction.org, in the first fiscal year, put out draft legislation and fiscal impacts between them and the governor's proposal. That would be a net tax increase in the first fiscal year. We have those numbers right after this. This is Johnny Cash Friday on Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell. We'll be right back after this.
My fellow Americans, in a few moments the celebration will begin here in New York Harbor. It's going to be quite a show. I was just looking over the preparations and thinking about a saying that we had back in Hollywood about never doing a scene with kids or animals because they'd steal the scene every time. So you can rest assured I wouldn't even think about trying to compete with a fireworks display, especially on the 4th of July. My remarks tonight will be brief, but it's worth remembering that all the celebration of this day is rooted in history. It's recorded that shortly after the Declaration of Independence was signed in Philadelphia, celebrations took place throughout the land, and many of the former colonists, they were just starting to call themselves Americans, set off cannons and marched in fife and drum parades. What a contrast with the sober scene that has taken place a short time earlier in Independence Hall. 56 men came forward to sign the parchment. It was noted at the time that they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors. And that was more than rhetoric. Each of those men knew the penalty for high treason to the crown. We must all hang together, Benjamin Franklin said, or assuredly we will all hang separately. And John Hancock, it is said, wrote his signature in large script so King George could see it without his spectacles. They were brave. They stayed brave through all the bloodshed of the coming years. Their courage created a nation built on a universal claim to human dignity, on the proposition that every man, woman, and child had a right to a future of freedom. For just a moment, let us listen to the words again. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Last night, when we rededicated Miss Liberty and relit her torch, we reflected on all the millions who came here in search of the dream of freedom inaugurated in Independence Hall. We reflected too.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell this morning. And right before the break, we were telling you about the tax task force. As many people who listen to the show know, they met for the last year and a half, and they just ended their meetings. And if you go to conduitforaction.org, there's a lengthy article there detailing some of the draft legislation and some of the fiscal impacts for what the task force is doing. But I actually sent in a FOIA request. I was curious to know how much has this tax task force cost so far. And we have some preliminary numbers that we can share for you. And for those watching online over at facebook.com/Conduit News, over on the YouTube page, Conduit News, or over at conduitnews.com, you can actually see some of these documents that we FOIA'd. And I just want to just highlight these real quickly because in total, the sum here is going to be over $361,000 has been spent by the Tax Task Force. And as we break it down, we can see what we're looking at here on the screen first is these are payments or reimbursements for things like hotels and mileage. Let's go back to the hotels and mileage document there. There we are. So these are reimbursements for that. And what you'll see down there at the bottom is consulting services that were paid. And if you've listened to the show very long, that was the PFM group. That was Randall Bauer, a strong leftist liberal who said Obama was light and Trump was the darkness. And so his firm was originally contracted to make about $312,000, but he was fired pretty quickly into that contract because basically for incompetence, I guess you could say. He showed up and told the task force the wrong income tax amounts for the state of Arkansas, and he was the consultant on taxes for the state at one point and had the wrong income tax numbers. But as you'll see there, his firm actually ended up making over several payments $156,000, $156,375 paid out in professional fees. And then you'll see $9,777.93 for reimbursements to John Sotska, John Bell, Joe Coletti, Stephen Johnson, Timothy Moore, Joseph Clark Jolly, William Brawley, Lisa Gee, and Carl Davis for airfare, hotel meals, taxi, parking, mileage, and that added up to over $9,000. And so now if we want to move over and look at how much did legislators make off of the Tax Task Force, because when legislators attend these meetings, they get not only mileage if they live from, I think it's about a 50-mile radius, might be a little more than that. If they come from further away than that, they get mileage, and they get a per diem check for coming to these meetings. And when we look at those numbers, for 2017, per diem and mileage was over $67,000. And then for 2018, there you see $67,717.80 for 2017 in per diem and mileage. And then when we look at 2018, that's more of a full year there. Over $129,000 legislators were paid in per diem and mileage. So should be getting some more documents, I'm told, from BLR highlighting some of the costs of the task force. But right now we're already looking at over $361,000 that the Tax Task Force has spent in per diem, mileage, consulting fees, travel, and hotel reimbursements. So those are the numbers, and we've got to take a break. We'll be right back. You're listening to Conduit News Radio.
On their courage in coming great distances and settling in a foreign land and then passing on to their children and their children's children. The hope symbolized in this statue here just behind us. The hope that is America. It is a hope that someday every people and every nation of the world will know the blessings of liberty. And it's the hope of millions all around the world. In the last few years, I've spoken at Westminster to the Mother of Parliaments, at Versailles, where French kings and world leaders have made war and peace. I've been to the Vatican in Rome, the Imperial Palace in Japan, and the ancient city of Beijing. I've seen the beaches of Normandy and stood again with those boys of Pointe du Hoc who long ago scaled the heights, and with, at that time, Lisa Zanetta Hen, who was at Omaha Beach for the father she loved, the father who had once dreamed of seeing again the place where he and so many brave others had landed on D-Day. But he had died before he could make that trip, and she made it for him. And Dad, she'd said, I'll always be proud. And I've seen the successors to these brave men. The young Americans in uniform all over the world. Young Americans like you here tonight who man the mighty USS Kennedy and the Iowa and the other ships of the line. I can assure you, you out there who are listening, that these young people are like their fathers and their grandfathers, just as willing, just as brave, and we can be just as proud. But our prayer tonight is that the call for their courage will never come, and that it's important for us, too, to be brave. Not so much the bravery of the battlefield, I mean the bravery of brotherhood. All through our history, our presidents and leaders have spoken of national unity and warned us that the real obstacle to moving forward the boundaries of freedom, the only permanent danger to the hope that is America, comes from within. It's easy enough to dismiss this as a kind of familiar exhortation. Yet the truth is that even two of our greatest founding fathers, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, once learned this lesson late in life. They'd worked so closely together in Philadelphia for independence. But once that was gained and a government was formed, something called partisan politics began to get in the way. After a bitter and divisive campaign, Jefferson defeated Adams for the presidency in 1800. And the night before Jefferson's inauguration, Adams slipped away to Boston, disappointed, brokenhearted, and bitter. For years, their estrangement lasted. But then, when both had retired, Jefferson at 68 to Monticello and Adams at 76 to Quincy, they began through their letters to speak again to each other. Letters that discussed almost every conceivable subject: gardening, horseback riding, even sneezing as a cure for hiccups, but other subjects as well: the loss of loved ones, the mystery of grief and sorrow, the importance of religion, and of course, the last thoughts, the final hopes of two old men, two great patriarchs for the country that they had helped to found and loved so deeply. It carries me back, Jefferson wrote about correspondence with his co-signer of the Declaration of Independence, to the times when, beset with difficulties and dangers, we were fellow laborers in the same cause, struggling for what is most valuable to man, his right to self-government, laboring always at the same oar, with some wave ever ahead threatening to overwhelm us, and yet passing harmless, we rode through the storm with heart and hand. It was their last gift to us, this lesson in brotherhood, in tolerance for each other, this insight into America's strength as a nation. And when both died on the same day, within hours of each other, that date was July 4th, 50 years.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell today. If you missed the first half of the show this morning, we replayed an interview with Dr. Jay Lear, one of the top interviews of the year, and just went over some numbers of the tax task force. Over $361,000 has been spent on the tax task force so far this year. Coming up at 7 o'clock, we just got confirmation of this. Anna Stieritz, an attorney with the Sanford Law Firm in Russellville. She's out of Russellville. She was on a few weeks ago, actually, detailing what the people of Pope County did. They kind of, in a way, tied the hands of the county judge, saying, hey, before any casino letter of support is issued, which must be done under the new constitutional amendment, before that happens, we want to vote on that. We want to vote on that approval and open up that process for a little more local control. Well, I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, a letter by the current Pope County judge was issued in support of a entity out of Mississippi. And now there's been a lawsuit filed. And so we just got confirmed that Anna will be coming on the show at 7 o'clock today to walk us all through this. What's the process? The lawsuit's been filed to stop this. So she coming up at 7 o'clock. You don't want to miss that. How, in my opinion, this is basically a county judge on his way out, for whatever reason, has decided to issue this letter in the last few days of serving. He's not been reelected or didn't run. He's not going to be the county judge anymore. From my understanding, the new county judge, the new mayor of Russellville, have both opposed the casino issue. A majority of the people voted against the amendment, and the ordinance that they passed to prohibit what he's basically trying to do was passed overwhelmingly by the people. And so really a defiant elected official in the face of what the public has said repeatedly now, what they want as their will. It's a very dangerous thing, and unfortunately a lawsuit has had to be filed to get a restraining order and injunction to stop that from happening. But we'll have all the details on that coming up at 7 o'clock, and we'll preview a little more of that in the next segment. But right now, we wanted to share another top interview of 2018 that you heard right here on Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell, and that was with Victor Davis Hanson. I think about a month, maybe a few weeks ago, Victor Davis Hanson was on. A great historian on Fox News quite a bit. Had a lengthy and great interview on Mark Levin's Fox News Sunday night program several weeks ago. So we wanted to replay that for those who might have been out and might have missed that. So this is an interview with Paul Harrell and Victor Davis Hanson.
Gentlemen, welcome back to the program. We have a very special treat. Please welcome to the program. We have Victor Davis Hanson on the program. He is an author. He's a military historian. Victor, good morning to you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Good morning.
I just want to first say I was so appreciative and really just in awe of the interview you did on Mark Levin's show, on his weekend Fox News show. It was so enlightening. As a matter of fact, there was one part of the interview towards the end, or maybe it was the middle, where you said, quote, "I don't think due process, free speech, the redress of grievances exist in major areas of American life today." Can you expand on that a little bit for us this morning?
Well, I was talking about the university in one sense, and that is I spent 35 years as a professor. So I know that if a professor were to say something in class, if he were to say, I feel that the history of Western civilization shows Christianity essential, he would probably be criticized and asked not to say that again. If somebody accused him of sexual assault, I don't think he would have a right of due process. If a speaker came and was going to question man-made global warming and the efforts to redress it, I don't think he would be able to finish the speech without some disruption. And then I think if you were in Washington and you were a politician and you got on the wrong side of a political issue and it was a frenzy, whether it was Scooter Libby or Carter Page, who was a victim of, I think, an improper FISA process that went after him and destroyed his reputation the same way Scooter Libby a few years ago did not leak the information about a CIA person. It was leaked by somebody else, if it was even leaked. I just don't think there'd be due process there. I don't think Brett Kavanaugh, when what we saw at that hearing, would conform to the norms of the Constitution. When people were screaming and yelling and disrupting, and you have protesters trying to break into his hearing, I don't think it was due process. I think people were afraid that there was due process.
Again, we're talking with author, military historian Victor Davis Hanson. Based on that, I mean, that's pretty scary stuff. It's a pretty scary reality that we're facing. And the country obviously is extremely divided, sir, and we know this. But do you see a way forward? Do you see what's next at all in terms of trying to heal? I mean, if we're starting to disagree on the idea of due process, can we come back from that, sir?
I think we have. We've been in this area before. There's been periods, 1968, 1861, 1932-29, where there was a lot of social tension, and it was drawn in. We put Japanese Americans in internment camps. FDR did. FDR tried to pack the court, which was illegal, basically. He went after newspapers that disagreed with him. But I think what we need to do is take a deep breath, and everybody's got to understand that if the country's not perfect, it's still pretty good. And that the only thing that separates us from other countries is due process and the rule of law. We're not the only country in the world that follows it. So I am worried. We have 500 jurisdictions in the United States called sanctuary cities or states where federal immigration law is declared null and void for all practical purposes. So that's really scary. But I think a lot of people who want instant social justice or their idea of equality of result feel that that end is so noble that they have the right to use extraordinary means to achieve it. Whenever you get down that road, it's really dangerous because they can't be convinced that they're acting out in a way that's contrary to the Constitution.
Yeah.
Because they feel that they have to, because their agendas are so much better than your agenda.
The last election, the midterms, what did you see in that recent election? How do you interpret those results, considering you have the politics of the Senate versus now the politics of the House?
Well, I think the Senate was encouraging, and it shows you that the way the Senate is set up, that it's what senators are based on geography, and then based on geography, if you look at a map of the United States, even the House map, it's mostly red. But if you flip that map and you calibrate it for population, then it's equal, or even more blue than red. So if you look at
Victor,
did pretty well.
I'm sorry, Victor. You broke up just for a second.
I'm sorry.
No, you were.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm from California, where we had a number of House races that were won on Election Day and lost in the subsequent 2 weeks from absentee ballots. So what I'm getting at is that the Republicans didn't do as badly as Bill Clinton did in his first midterm of Barack Obama, but they were about a little bit worse than the average. And the reason, I think, is that they've got some fundamental problems they've always had, but right now they have a problem of getting 51% of the popular vote. And I think Trump's getting close. He's 46, 47. But to get over to that edge, which will be critical in 2020, he's got to take his message to blacks, Latinos, because it's a good message, and it's helped them more than any other politician in recent memory. And then he's got to appeal to 4 or 5% more of the suburban voter. Not change his agenda, just explain it and to make the effort. So he can't win without his base, but he can't win only with his base. And that's true of most politicians, but he just needs 4 or 5 more percentage of support, and he would have not lost the House. The second thing is he's got to really work on the voting after Election Day ballot, or what we used to call the absentee ballot. Certain jurisdictions, he's getting killed, and I don't mean he alone, the Republican brand is, and they've got to work on registration and voting monitoring and getting out the absentee vote, because in California that lost at least 5 seats.
Yeah. Again, we're talking with Victor Davis Hanson, author, military historian. You probably saw him recently on Mark Levin's show on the Fox News channel. Sir, you got a book coming out next year, The Case for Trump, which I am very interested to read. You also have a piece written over at AmericanGreatness.com back on the 25th of this month, The Cost of Presidential Candor. Can you talk a little bit about what you hope to accomplish in your book and a little bit about the cost of presidential candor?
Well, very quickly, on the book, I explain how Donald Trump beat 16 very qualified rivals in the primary and why he won. And it was essentially an appeal that no Republican had made in my memory, that the working classes are not going to have to move or learn computer coding, but that you could re-industrialize the United States, energy production, muscular labor. That was a very new idea, and that got him it got him 9 or 10 states. And so from that starting point, then I explained why his agenda was a little bit different than a Romney or McCain or Bob Dole. And I try to argue that there's a way that agenda could be institutionalized and see him win in 2020. And then also I talk about the idea of a person without military or political experience winning the presidency, how he did it, why he did it, and finally, why does he incur such great hatred from people? And is Trump the messenger enhance the message? Or anybody else that had that same message? Or does sometimes his crassness and his exuberance and his tweeting nullify it? So that would be the argument of the book. And then on the article that came out on the 25th, I kind of explore one of the issues of the book, and I try to argue that part of his problem being defined as not getting 51% of a majority is that when he remarks on current events, he's usually pretty accurate. He says it's
okay, so we lost you just for a second. When he remarks on current events, he's usually pretty accurate, you were saying.
So he's accurate, but he's candid, and by that I mean he says that the fires in California out here we could hardly breathe were because of poor forest management, true, and he'll have to cut off federal funds. Maybe wise or stupid, but you don't say that right during a catastrophe. Same thing with Judge Tiger, obviously an Obama judge, obviously biased for the Trump agenda, but yet he said something that was accurate, and then he incurred something from the Chief Justice who was inaccurate, saying that judges aren't politicized, but people would probably prefer what Justice Roberts said than what Trump did, and I could do that with 5 or 6 other examples about the Khashoggi case in Saudi Arabia, etc. We're not going to cut off Saudi Arabia because it's an anti-Iranian ally. We have a lot of arms sales, and it supplies oil to the Western world. The point I'm getting at is that a lot of politicians wouldn't mention all of those things. They would just cut the difference 50-50 on the one hand, on the other hand. And he doesn't do that, and that's why he got elected and appeals to people. But I don't think anybody knows to what degree he can't get over the hump with the next 5 or 6% to get reelected or to ensure that he controls the Congress, because a lot of people would rather hear euphemisms than the truth. And I have an article, I think, coming out today that sort of like hiring a gunslinger in the Old Western. You can't solve a problem when you want somebody who's blunt speaking. He comes into town, gets rid of the cattle bearer, everything's going good, and then you want him out because he was too blunt or crass, or he employed methodologies that you feel, in retrospect.
All right, welcome back. This is Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell, and that was one of the top interviews of 2018. Paul Harrell with Victor Davis Hanson. We're going to take a break right now. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell, and we'll be back after this. This is Johnny Cash Friday. We'll be back right after these messages.
When both had retired, Jefferson at 68 to Monticello and Adams at 76 to Quincy, they began through their letters to speak again to each other. Letters that discussed almost every conceivable subject: gardening, horseback riding, even sneezing as a cure for hiccups, but other subjects as well: the loss of loved ones, the mystery of grief and sorrow, the importance of religion And of course, the last thoughts, the final hopes of two old men, two great patriarchs for the country that they had helped to found and loved so deeply. It carries me back, Jefferson wrote about correspondence with his co-signer of the Declaration of Independence, to the times when, beset with difficulties and dangers, we were fellow laborers in the same cause, struggling for what is most valuable to man, his right to self-government, laboring always at the same oar, with some wave ever ahead threatening to overwhelm us, and yet passing harmless, we rode through the storm with heart and hand. It was their last gift to us, this lesson in brotherhood, in tolerance for each other, this insight into America's strength as a nation. And when both died on the same day, within hours of each other, that date was July 4th, 50 years exactly after that first gift to us, the Declaration of Independence. My fellow Americans, it falls to us to keep faith with them and all the great Americans of our past. Believe me, if there's one impression I carry with me after the privilege of holding for 5.5 years.
Russell-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Is the office held by Adams, Jefferson, and Lincoln. It is this, that the things that unite us, America's past of which we're so proud, our hopes and aspirations for the future of the world and this much-loved country, these things far outweigh what little divides us. So tonight, we are reaffirmed that Jew and Gentile, we are one nation under God. The black and white, we are one nation indivisible. That Republican and Democrat, we are all Americans. Tonight, with heart and hand, through whatever trial and travail, we pledge ourselves to each other and to the cause of human freedom, a cause that has given light to this land and hope to the world. My fellow Americans, we're known around the world as a confident and a happy people. Tonight, there's much to celebrate and many blessings to be grateful for. So while it's good to talk about serious things, it's just as important and just as American to have some fun. Now, let's have some fun. Let the celebration begin.
A light to the world, a beacon held high. The great symbol of freedom beckoning from a harbor. To the north, to the south, to the east.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell. And I want to preview this story. Again, we've been talking about it a little bit in the first hour. And coming up at about 7:05, attorney Anna Stieritz will be on the show detailing a new lawsuit in response to Pope County judge who has issued a letter of support for a casino entity out of Mississippi. He goes out of office at the end of this month, just in a few days. A new county judge is coming in. But over at the Arkansas Times, the headline is "Lawsuit Filed to Stop Move to Clear Way for Casino in Pope County." And you know, kind of what we were talking about earlier, the citizens of Pope County basically stood up and said, hey, we want to vote on whether or not a letter is issued in support to open up a casino in our backyard. And so that ordinance was passed the same time the new constitutional amendment allowing a casino in Pope County was passed. And so a lot of stuff is going on here. Now there's been a letter from the Cherokee Nation businesses who want to be the ones to set up the casino in Pope County. They issued a letter yesterday to the county judge basically saying, hey, you know, we want to be the ones to do this and want to work with you, and mention the ordinance and the impact the ordinance would have on his letter of support. There's been a request for a legal opinion from the Attorney General about how this letter, because it is a little vague, because you know we got a copy of the letter here, and basically you know the letter just says you know if there is a you know approval, a license issued for a casino, I give my support for Gulfside Casino Partnership. Signed Pope County Judge Jim Ed Gibson. So it's a little vague exactly what authority that is, if that's a full-blown letter of support. And so we're going to have all the details on that coming up at 7:05 with attorney Anna Stieritz. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think this is one of those times where basically the will of the people is basically being undone, or trying to be undone, by an elected official who's on his way out. And it's really sad for the residents of Pope County who spoke overwhelmingly on this issue on several votes. And so we'll have more of that coming up. This is Conduit News Radio. Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
President Pitzer, Mr. Vice President, Governor, Congressman Thomas, Senator Wiley and Congressman Miller, Mr. Webb, Mr. Bell, scientists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your President having made me an honorary visiting professor, and I will assure you that my first lecture will be very brief. I am delighted to be here, and I'm particularly delighted to be here on this occasion. We meet at a college noted for knowledge, in a city noted for progress, in a state noted for strength, and we stand in need of all three. For we meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds. Despite the striking fact that most of the scientists that the world has ever known are alive and working today, despite the fact that this nation's own scientific manpower is doubling every 12 years in a rate of growth more than 3 times that of our population as a whole, despite that, the vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension. No man can fully grasp how far and how fast we have come. But condense, if you will, the 50,000 years of man's recorded history in a time span of but a half a century. Stated in these terms, we know very little about the first 40 years, except at the end of them, advanced man had learned to use the skins of animals to cover them. Then about 10 years ago, under this standard, man emerged from his caves to construct other kinds of shelter. Only 5 years ago, man learned to write and use a cart with wheels. Christianity began less than 2 years ago. The printing press came this year. And then less than 2 months ago, during this whole 50-year span of human history, the steam engine provided a new source of power. Newton explored the meaning of gravity. Last month, electric lights and telephones and automobiles and airplanes became available. Only last week did we develop penicillin and television and nuclear power. And now, if America's new spacecraft succeeds in reaching Venus, we will have literally reached the stars before midnight tonight. This is a breathtaking pace, and such a pace cannot help but create new ills as it dispels old. New ignorance, new problems, new dangers. Surely the opening vistas of space promise high costs and hardships, as well as high reward. So it is not surprising that some would have us stay where we are a little longer, to rest, to wait. But this city of Houston, this state of Texas, this country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them. This country was conquered by those who move forward, and so will space. William Bradford, speaking in 1630 of the founding of the Plymouth Bay Colony, said that all great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties, and both must be enterprised and overcome with answerable courage. If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. This is Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters in for Paul Harrell today. Right now on the show, we've been talking about a little bit in the first hour about Pope County and what's going on there with the casino issue. Just kind of preview that a little bit. Basically, what's happened is the current county judge, Jim Ed Gibson, has issued a letter saying if a license issue for a casino in Pope County, Arkansas, if there's one issued, I give my support for Gulfside Casino Partnership. Well, the citizens of Pope County passed an ordinance saying, hey, before a letter of support kind of goes out, we want to be able to vote on it and to vote on this casino issue. So right now we have attorney Anna Steerich. She was on the show a few weeks ago detailing this issue, and we wanted to get her back on to let us know kind of what's going on now, what's the legal aspects of this, and where do we go from here. So welcome back, Anna, and just kind of get us up to speed. What happened yesterday, and where are we on this casino issue there in Pope County?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, a lot happened yesterday. So towards the morning, rumors started to swirl around that Judge Jim Ed Gibson was considering writing this letter of support in violation of the Pope County ordinance. So a lot of people just called him up and asked him, and he refused to state what his intentions were, or hinted that it was already done, or hinted that he, was just going to, make it up as he went along. By mid-afternoon, it had become obvious that he had written a letter of support because he told somebody that he had, and we got a hold of a copy of it around 4 p.m. But prior to that, because of all the rumors swirling and because of things that Judge Gibson had said, we went ahead and filed an injunction asking a court to forbid him from writing such a letter. We got that filed, but when we took it to judges, all 4 judges in Pope County in the 5th Judicial District refused themselves from that, which is understandable. They all work in the same courthouse. So currently the lawsuit's filed. The order has not been signed by a judge. We'll be filing an amended complaint today, since the letter has actually surfaced, asking for the court to set that aside through a writ of certiorari or writ of mandamus. So that's where we are legally, and there'll be further filings today, and hopefully will be assigned to a special justice by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which is what happens when all your judges recuse themselves.
Okay. So basically what's happened, sounds like to me, is, I'm looking at the letter here, it was dated December 21st. So
right.
sometime last week, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, December 21st was a big day for casino happenings because we had a meeting. There was a meeting, I should say, of the Arkansas Valley Alliance for Economic Development, which is a public-private partnership in Pope County. There are public representatives that sit on that committee and private citizens who pay for a spot on that committee. That committee had a surprise emergency meeting at 7:30 in the morning. It was not publicly announced in any way that I heard of, in which 4 members, some of whom sit on the quorum court, proposed that they would encourage the judge to write this letter before he left office, even though we have this valid ordinance in place saying exactly that he can't do that without a public election. So Judge Skelton, Roy Reeves, John Bates, Will Wetzel, this was reported afterwards, asked for this alliance committee to do that resolution. Several of them, not those people, other alliance members were like, what? That's what this meeting is for? And they called for it to be adjourned. And it did adjourn without that activity happening. However, that's the same day that that letter is dated. So apparently that was maybe some concerted action between all of them, maybe trying to give them each other some cover. I don't know. I wasn't behind closed doors, but the letter's dated the same day that those 4 men stepped forward and publicly stated their desire for the judge to override our ordinance.
Interesting. We're talking about in the first hour. Basically, what this seems like to me is the will of the people of Polk County seems clear on this issue. Y'all issued an ordinance saying, you can't issue one of these letters before a vote. The people voted against the amendment. A majority of the county did. They elected a new county judge and a new mayor who, to my knowledge, they came out in opposition to the casino in Pope County. And yet just days before this outgoing county judge is to leave office, it seems like someone's whispering in his ear, maybe someone with the possible financial gain from these casinos, saying, hey, we really want this here.
Well, you have to ask why he would do something so clearly in violation of what his constituents desire. They've made their wishes very clear through, positive political activity. We had a ballot petition for that ordinance. It wasn't like it just floated down in our laps and people just happened to check yes on it. That took a lot of work. There was a lot of political involvement getting that thing passed. And, on the face of it, a county judge should be doing what his county wants him to do, and he is doing 180 degrees the opposite.
Yeah, and, I found it interesting. This LLC he mentions in the letter, Gulfside Casino Partnership, LLC of Gulfport, Mississippi. When you look at the financial records for one of these committees that were set up to lobby in favor of the casino, they actually gave money, I think $10,000 or $50,000, looks like, to support a casino in Polk County. And just, a few months later, now the county judge is issuing a letter of support for this specific LLC.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They gave $50,000 to this group called Jobs for Polk County late in the game before the election. Earlier, they had donated, I think, $10,000, maybe to drive Arkansas forward. But yeah, it's a total of $60,000. It's pretty easy to imagine how you might want to connect those dots.
Oh, absolutely. Something we always say is follow the money. So one thing that was interesting, too, I was reading in this article from the Arkansas Times was the Cherokee Nation has now gotten involved and issued a letter yesterday basically saying, hey, wait up, we want to be the one that opens the casino. We want to work on that process.
Well, that's the thing. The initial state amendment contemplates this process where various casinos apply to a county for a license above board. They make proposals that people can evaluate on whether or not they like them. And so I think what the Cherokee are saying is that's what we, thought was going to happen. If y'all are going to issue a license, let us apply too. But none of that has happened. There's been no proposal brought forth. No one from Gulfside has made any kind of public statement that they're wanting to, build something here, that they're wanting to operate a casino here. Pine Bluff, bless their hearts, they want a casino. They've been very transparent about that process. The Quapaw have had multiple months of discussions with county officials. It's been done publicly, openly. People can evaluate what Quapaw is contemplating bringing to the county. Nothing like that has happened in Polk County.
Yeah, that's just, in my opinion, that's just not good government. You want, like you're saying, you want an open, transparent process. And it's, it looks like the citizens of Polk County envisioned something like this very thing happening. And they said, no, we're not going to do it. So, Anna, what happens now? You mentioned a special justice will have to be appointed. So I know a legal question that was asked, I think, in a letter submitted to the AG was, well, what happens, with this letter when the new county judge comes in? Can he write the new county judge write a new letter saying, no, we rescind that letter?
That is a really good question. And our state senator, Breanne Davis, who represents part of Polk County or all of Polk County, I can't remember, brought up a lot of permutations in her letter to the Attorney General's office. Because honestly, the legislation that sets up this casino plan is it didn't go through the legislative process, so there's lots and lots of unanswered questions. There are questions that arise from the face of the amendment because it just says letter of support and it goes on. There's nothing that that would let you know how the letter of support is to be handled, who how long it's good for, how it can be rescinded, etc. So Breanne asked a lot of good questions in her Attorney General request. Now, those are not answered yet. So simultaneously, we've got the Arkansas Racing Commission working on rules that will hopefully answer some of these questions. But, these two things are going forward at the same time. There's got to be some clarity to this process in order for it not to be just like an insane, what we're seeing right now. We're behind closed doors. People are writing letters that, by the way, I was reading Max Brantley's article, I think it was his, where he says that close associates of Judge Gibson are trying to clarify that this is not actually a letter of support. Now, it may not have been that article. It may have been something from River Valley Now. But So, I mean, there's a further twist. Is this a letter of support or is it not? Maybe it's just a note, in which case does it have any legal effect whatsoever? Maybe it's a memo. I don't know. Yeah, because it does sound like Judge Gibson is trying to get the word out now. Hey, that's not actually a letter of support. Well, it's a letter, and it says, I would support this if a license were given, which, that's just nonsense because the amendment says you can't get a license without a letter of support. So, I mean, it kind of leaves the door open for all kinds of interpretation or misinterpretation. It's just not the way to go forward.
Well, if that's what he's, saying now and supporters are saying now, we'll just issue another letter saying in no way was that intended to be an issue letter of support,
Indeed, the door is wide open
Yeah.
for him to come forward with a public statement clarifying what, in fact, that piece of paper is supposed to be. So, I hope that he will do that out of respect for the people of Polk County that he's elected to help.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just mind-boggling in this day and age with, the amount of information, the FOIA law that's in place that, someone would try to do this and, maybe he'll come out with a letter and clear this up. But in the short term, this looks really, really bad. This looks bad. It's put a lot of limbo in the situation, and it looks like exactly what the people of Polk County didn't want to happen when they issued their voice on this ordinance.
That is fair to say. That ordinance passed with almost 70% of the vote. It was over 69% of the vote. The ordinance does one thing. It puts the power to make that letter support decision in the laps of Polk County voters. That is all it does. And it specifically and explicitly says, county judge can't give that letter until we've had a general or special election where voters can weigh in on that question. And for him to even make a gesture of issuing a letter of support without that general or special election is just really a slap in the face to voters.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you and thank everyone on the ground there who, has rushed to put a stop to this because, unfortunately, that's kind of the last measure people have when their government's running roughshod over the laws they've written, over the laws that have been written at the state level, is the legal recourse and to file a lawsuit. So I want to thank you for what you're doing there and keep us updated. I know this will be a big story over the next few weeks, I'm sure, especially as the transition of power comes as well there in Polk County. So keep us updated. And what can people do? Is there anything they can do right now to kind of get involved in this, stay up to date on this?
Well, if they live in Polk County, Jim A. Gibson is still their county judge until the end of the year. They're welcome to make their voice heard with him. Let him know that, A, he needs to follow the ordinance, and B, if that letter is not a letter of support, he should make that clear for everybody's benefit.
Yeah. Well, I'll give the phone numbers right here on this letter. Phone number, Jim Ed Gibson, Polk County Judge, 479-968-7487. So if the residents of Polk County listen there on KARV, KARV there in the River Valley area, if they want to reach out to their current Polk County Judge, Jim Ed Gibson, they can call him at 479-968-7487. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I'm kind of on late notice and getting us up to date on this, and for the work you're doing this, I'll give you the last word.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate the opportunity to keep everybody abreast of what's going on, and I just want to say that, when stuff like this happens, it makes you just really grateful for the rule of law.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Anna, you have a great weekend and a happy new year, and we'll stay in contact and make sure we get updates from you and get it out there to the people to know what these politicians are doing in their name. And so, Anna, thank you again for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Bye-bye.
All right, that was Anna Stieritz, an attorney from the Russellville area, detailing us on what is going on in Polk County. An outgoing county judge there issuing a letter of, it looks clearly like a letter of support to a specified entity, Gulfport Casino Partnership. Looks like maybe backing up against that. So, but like I said, if you have questions, contact your Polk County Judge, Jim Ed Gibson. The phone number listed on this letter is 479-968-7487. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell, and this is Johnny Cash Friday. We got some Johnny Cash music coming up as we head to break. But stay tuned. We're going to recap some of the top stories of the year coming up in the next segment. But want to thank Anna for her work there in Polk County. and then we'll be back right after this break.
And cannot be deterred. The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And it is one of the great adventures of all time. And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space. Those who came before us made certain that this country rode the first waves of the Industrial Revolution, the first waves of modern invention, and the first wave of nuclear power. And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it. For the eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon, and to the planets beyond. And we have vowed that we shall not see it governed by a hostile flag of conquest, but by a banner of freedom and peace. We have vowed that we shall not see space filled with weapons of mass destruction, but with instruments of knowledge and understanding. Yet the vows of this nation can only be fulfilled if we in this nation are first, and therefore we intend to be first. In short, our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort, to solve these mysteries, to solve them for the good of all men, and to become the world's leading spacefaring nation. We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people. For space science, like nuclear science and all technology, has no conscience of its own. Whether it will become a force for good or ill depends on man. And only if the United States occupies a position of preeminence can we help decide whether this new ocean will be a sea of peace or a new terrifying theater of war. I do not say that we should or will go unprotected against the hostile misuse of space any more than we go unprotected against the hostile use of land or sea. But I do say that space can be explored and mastered without feeding the fires of war, without repeating the mistakes that man has made in extending his writ around this globe of ours. There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind, and its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too. It is for these reasons that I regard the decision last year to shift our efforts in space from low to high gear as among the most important decisions that will be made during my incumbency in the office of the presidency. In the last 24 hours, we have seen facilities now being created for the greatest and most complex exploration in man's history. We have felt the ground shake and the air shattered by the testing of a Saturn C-1 booster rocket, many times as powerful as the Atlas which launched John Glenn, generating power equivalents to 10.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell today. If you just missed that interview, I would encourage you to head on over to conduitnews.com, and we'll have a clip of that interview up today or maybe next week sometime early on. Interview with Anna Stieritz detailing what's going on in Pope County on this casino issue. If you're just joining us, Jim Ed Gibson, Pope County Judge, has issued a letter supporting Gulfside Casino Partnership if a license is issued for a casino there in Pope County. And you heard from Anna, this is in direct violation of a county ordinance that was just passed by the people of Pope County. And we referenced a letter there, a letter from State Senator Breanne Davis was sent to Attorney General Leslie Rutledge with some questions about the legal authority and the legal questions about this letter. So good for State Senator Breanne Davis being on top of things there. It just caught like we see it, and so good for her there, getting that out there for the people of Pope County. So stay tuned to Conduit News. I know Paul will stay on top of that story and keep us updated there. But at the end of the day, without free speech and the ability for shows like this to happen, this information may not get out there. Websites, Arkansas Times did a story on this. Conduit News Discovery. I know people are sharing it on Twitter, and it'll probably get picked up more and more over the coming days. But without free speech, none of this would be possible. Without free speech and political speech to speak out and say, hey, this is what government officials are doing in our name. That is so important. And for any public official, for any state senator, state representative, a county judge, any elected official at any office to condemn people for speaking out and letting people know what their elected officials are doing in their name with their money, that is wrong. And we must stand up to that. We must be cognizant of that. It is okay to criticize elected officials when they run roughshod over the will of the people. I mean, this could not be any clearer, folks. The people of Pope County overwhelmingly on several different votes, when you look at the vote for the ordinance itself, they passed that overwhelmingly. In the county, they voted against the constitutional amendment for the casino, and they voted for a new county judge and a new Russellville mayor who were clearly opposed to the casino issue. I mean, this could not be clearer, and we have to stand up and speak out and support free speech, free political speech against our government. It's one of the most protected forms of speech in history, and there's a reason for that, because a tyrannical government will run roughshod over the people if people do not speak up, if we don't have attorneys like Anna Stieritz filing lawsuits to stop this nonsense. So coming up after this break, though, we're going to recap some more top stories of 2018. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell.
1,000 automobiles with their accelerator on the floor. We have seen the site where 5 F-1 rocket engines, each one as powerful as all 8 engines of the Saturn combined, will be clustered together to make the advanced Saturn missile, assembled in a new building to be built at Cape Canaveral, as tall as a 48-story structure, as wide as a city block, and as long as 2 lengths of this field. Within these last 19 months, at least 45 satellites have circled the Earth. Some 40 of them were made in the United States of America, and they were far more sophisticated and supplied far more knowledge to the people of the world than those of the Soviet Union. The Mariner spacecraft now on its way to Venus is the most intricate instrument in the history of space science. The accuracy of that shot is comparable to firing a missile from Cape Canaveral and dropping it in this stadium between the 40-yard lines. Transit satellites are helping our ships at sea to steer a safer course. Tireless satellites have given us unprecedented warnings of hurricanes and storms, and will do the same for forest fires and icebergs. We have had our failures, but so have others, even if they do not admit them, and they may be less public. To be sure, we are behind, and will be behind for some time in manned flight. But we do not intend to stay behind, and in this decade we shall make up and move ahead. The growth of our science and education will be enriched by new knowledge of our universe and environment, by new techniques of learning and mapping and observation, by new tools and computers for industry, medicine, and the home as well as the school. Technical institutions such as Rice will reap the harvest of these gains. And finally, the space effort itself, while still in its infancy, has already created a great number of new companies and tens and thousands of new jobs. Space and related industries are generating new demands in investment and skilled personnel, and this city and this state and this region will share greatly in this growth. What was once the furthest outpost on the old frontier of the West will be the furthest outpost on the new frontier of science and space. Houston, your city of Houston, with its manned spacecraft center, will become the heart of a large scientific and engineering community. During the next 5 years, the National Aeronautic and Space Administration expects to double the number of scientists and engineers in this area, to increase its outlays for salaries and expenses to $60 million a year, to invest some $200 million in plant and laboratory facilities, and to direct or contract for new space efforts over $1 billion from this center in this city. To be sure, all this costs us all a good deal of money. This year's space budget is 3 times what it was in January 1961, and it is greater than the space budget of the previous 8 years combined. That budget now stands at $5.4 billion a year, a staggering sum, though somewhat less than we pay for cigarettes and cigars every year. Space expenditures will soon rise some more, from 40 cents per person per week to more.
All right, good morning and welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell today. We've had a great show so far, yesterday and today. What we've been doing is highlighting some of the top interviews and top stories of 2018 that you heard right here on Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. Hey, if you have a top story, top news article, top issue in Arkansas politics that stood out to you this year, give us a text, 870-275-9799. Someone texted in a little earlier today. They thought that one of the top issues was the Taft decision in Arkansas, which was a huge issue that further cleared up for anyone who was still confused, which they shouldn't have been, but who may still be confused on the issue of constitutional carry in this state. That decision and some language in that decision made it clear again and gave us another precedent that Arkansas is in fact a constitutional carry state. So thank you for texting that in. If you have a top issue that stood out to you, give us a text, 870-275-9799. What we wanted to do is highlight some of the top stories this year over at conduitforaction.org. If you don't already go visit that site and subscribe to their emails, you can do that at conduitforaction.org. Type in your email address right there in the top right-hand corner when it comes up, and you can get all the latest. You can get these articles sent directly to your inbox when they are published. And so I wanted to highlight some of the top articles from CFA this year. And one of those top articles I wanted to highlight was this one, House of Representatives Changed Forever. It's by Mr. David Ferguson, and he talks a lot about the history of the Arkansas House of Representatives. For those who don't know, Mr. David Ferguson is former director of the Arkansas Bureau of Legislative Research. So that's, the attorneys that help and draft and run things over there in the House of Representatives and the State Senate. And so he was there for, I think, over 30 years, I think maybe 32 years, yeah. There at BLR and was director there his last few years there. So he knows a lot of history of the Arkansas State House of Representatives. So he details that history there and talks more about how things are going to be changing. And the big change that we all know that is coming January 14th in the Arkansas House of Representatives is that the Speaker of the House will now have the authority to appoint all committee selections, not just chair and co-chair, but every committee selection. Those have not been announced. As far as I know, they will not be announced until January 14th. The new Speaker of the House will be Matthew Shepard, and he will announce those assignments at that time. So we won't really know kind of where things stand, heading into last session. You could look at some of the committees and look at who the members are and look at their past voting records and be like, okay, I leaned a little more conservative or a little more liberal. But we won't really know that. We won't have a clear picture of that until these committee selections are made. Now, the state Senate, it's still a seniority process, right? And so they had their committee selections. There's an article over at conduitnews.com about that a few weeks ago. They chose their committee and the chair of those committees and co-chairs or vice chairs of those committees. But in the House of Representatives, they voted and changed the rules of the House to say that the Speaker himself and the Speaker alone would appoint all committee selections. So I would encourage everyone to go read that article. Great history there, going all the way back into the 1990s about how appointments were made versus what we're about to move into with a new House Speaker. So that's one of the top stories this year from Conduit for Action. Another top story over at conduitforaction.org is this article titled, How High's the Water Mama Arkansas Public Corruption? So to me, that's probably one of the top stories, if not the top story of 2018. The public corruption that really came to light, that had been whispered about year after year, that came to light most publicly in the John Woods corruption trial. And I was privileged enough to be there in the courtroom for most of that trial and all of the sentencing phase when him, Randall Shelton, Orrin Paris from Ecclesia College were all sentenced in that case. But this article does a really good job recapping the public corruption in Arkansas. And as everyone knows, their investigation's still ongoing. So 2019, we may see even more shoes drop. And of course, we have the pending trial of former state senator Jeremy Hutchinson that'll be coming up in 2019. But a really great article of How High's the Water Mama, and talks about the public corruption that's gone on in Arkansas this year. And again, that's an article by David Ferguson, and he recaps kind of the history over time, how this public corruption issue has taken place, some historical cases of public corruption, and kind of how that compares to this last year, where we saw so much public corruption here in Arkansas, and I think we will see, if not more, as much probably come to light in 2019. So one of the top articles over at Conduit for Action this year also was Expose Liberal Voting Records and Be Called a Terrorist. And this is about comments made by State Senator Jim Hendren at a Benton County Republican meeting in which he compared Conduit to people over, I think it was in Afghanistan, who wore suicide bombs and turned on the people who had been helping them, and blew them up. So comparing them to terrorists, suicide bombing terrorists is what he compared Conduit, a conservative organization here in Arkansas fighting for limited government and the principles of the Republican Party and economic freedom and individual liberty, these principles that most every Republican in the state runs on. And that goes back to a point we were talking about earlier in the show. Without free speech, without political free speech, we have no recourse outside of elections that can be bought sometimes. We have no recourse to bring to light what these public officials are doing. And so that's what this article really does. It talks about how, the various articles that highlighted Senator Hendren and others' voting record, how that really angered legislative officials into where, they've been, basically wanting to silence Conduit and other organizations. And so, that really stood out this year. You see that on the left all the time. They want to, silence conservative people when they come to campus. Ben Shapiro, they want to silence and scream down anyone who has an opposing idea that they don't disagree with. They're afraid to debate the issues, and they're afraid to debate really the record that they support, the record of socialism, which has led to death and depravity for decades in the countries that it's been tried in. But you see that on the left, where they want to shut down free speech. They want to shut down discourse on the issues. And it's really unfortunate that you're seeing this more from elected officials. But that was a top issue in 2018, and we'll look and see how that goes into 2019. It won't be an election year, but I think you'll probably see more of the same with elected officials who, they'll say, being criticized or, being so negative. But at the end of the day, you have a vote up or down, yes, no, you can vote, not vote. That's a vote in and of itself. And when that's reported, some officials don't like it, but that's just the absolute truth. You voted a certain way, and here's your votes. So, but that was one of the top articles over at Conduit for Action this year. Expose liberal voting records and be called a terrorist. Another top article over at Conduit for Action this year was titled, "But That Is the Way Budgeting Has Always Been Done." And this was a really good article talking about the budgeting process here in Arkansas, right? And I'll just read a portion here. The fatal flaw in the Democrats' Arkansas budget plan, which the Republicans inherited, because remember, it wasn't until just recently we became a Republican state. And so a lot of the systems that are built up down there were built and refined by Democrats over time, and further refined by Bill and Hillary Clinton. And Paul talks a lot about that, how those same systems are still in place for the most part here in Arkansas. The article says here, the fatal flaw in the Democrats' Arkansas budget plan. The starting place for the next year's budget begins with then determining how much money the agency got in the previous year, and then ask two questions. One, what percentage budget increase should all agencies get for the next year? And two, should the agency get extra money in addition to the across-the-board increase? The plan does not ask, one, do we need this specific program anymore? Two, is the program meeting its goals? Three, is there a better way? And four, is the agency wasting money and needs to tighten its belt so it will not spend money unwisely? Those questions are not asked. It's just, take the baseline from 1 year. Okay, how much more do we get? Not much else is asked. And so we'll see if that changes in 2019. And, that gets me thinking about the government shutdown right now. You hear these terms when the government shuts down, and I think this time it's just a 25% shutdown is what I've been hearing. But what you hear is, it doesn't affect essential services. Only non-essential services are affected. And I've heard that here at the state level when cuts are made. Well, it doesn't affect any essential services. So my first thought is, why are we funding anything that's not essential, right? But then, my second thought is, how are we defining and categorizing and, clarifying what's essential and not essential? And that's kind of the question that is raised in this article. We need to be asking those questions as we're budgeting, instead of just doing it the same old way. That's usually the response from people that don't like change. Well, that's the way it's always been done. We've never done it another way, so we'll just keep doing it that way some more. Well, it's supposed to be a new day in Arkansas, right? We have Republican supermajorities. They can do things however they want, whatever they think is the best way. And so a big opportunity will be coming forward in 2019 to really shake things up. Another opportunity with supermajorities, Republicans. So we're hopeful for that. I'm hopeful, especially in the House of Representatives, with some newer leadership there, with House Majority Leader Marcus Richmond, and State Representative Brant Smith, serving as the House Whip. Those are two conservative leaders, and so I'm hopeful that the House of Representatives will stand up and send a strong conservative message. It was the House of Representatives last time that stopped the internet sales tax, that stopped the gas tax increase. At that time, according to estimates, that was over $300 million in 2017 that was stopped by the Arkansas House of Representatives. And they should be recognized for that and thanked for that. And encourage your legislators to continue to make those stands as we move into 2019. The legislative session is just a few weeks away, and within the first few weeks, you're very likely to see some of these same tax increase measures that were defeated in 2017 come back on the table. And the question remains now, will they stand up again and say, no, we're not raising taxes on the people. We're just not going to do it. We're going to find a way to better prioritize and better budget with the money we're already getting in, which is records amount of revenue, to be able to fund the government. So anyway, that was one of the top articles from Conduit for Action this year. But that is the way budgeting has been done. High spending and lack of accountability. Another article, a positive article from this year was "Thank you Arkansas GOP for putting principles back in platform." If you'll remember, back in 2017, Conduit for Action wrote an article about how the principles of limited government and mentions of God were removed out of the preamble section of the Arkansas Republican platform. And that article was shared widely, especially in Republican circles. And you actually heard here on Conduit News Radio of a member of the state committee who said it was that article that tipped him off about, hey, we need to put these principles back in the platform. And so that article highlights that process, how it played out, and how the Arkansas GOP put back in mentions of limited government, put back in mentions of faith and God back into the Republican Party platform, after, being prompted, or some people didn't even know it had happened until they had read that Conduit for Action article in 2017. And so I think that was a top article and top story of 2018 in Arkansas politics. And then finally, wanted to highlight there's several articles about the tax task force. We talked about that yesterday, talked about it earlier today, how the tax task force has spent over $361,000 this year, or in the last year and a half since its inception, on per diem, mileage, travel, hotel, and consulting contracts. Over $361,000 so far, according to numbers from BLR that were FOIA'd from them. But there are a lot of articles from 2018 detailing all these meetings that went on a monthly basis from the tax task force. And the questions that were asked, maybe the questions that weren't asked. So I encourage everyone to go to conduitforaction.org and just search Tax Task Force. The search box is very easy to find right there in the top right-hand corner. And you can search Tax Task Force and find numerous articles about what the Tax Task Force did, what they didn't do, what they came back and changed. And then towards the top, you'll see the most recent one, which basically recaps the draft legislation and fiscal impacts as we head into the 2019 session. So those were some of the top articles over at conduitforaction.org. Again, if you're not already subscribed, go over there and please do that. But it is Johnny Cash Friday here on Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell. We're going to take a break. Here's some Johnny Cash music, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Large scientific and engineering community. During the next 5 years, the National Aeronautic and Space Administration expects to double the number of scientists and engineers in this area. to increase its outlays for salaries and expenses to $60 million a year, to invest some $200 million in plant and laboratory facilities, and to direct or contract for new space efforts over $1 billion from this center in this city. To be sure, all this costs us all a good deal of money. This year's space budget is 3 times what it was in January 1961, and it is greater than the space budget of the previous 8 years combined. That budget now stands at $5.4 billion a year, a staggering sum, though somewhat less than we pay for cigarettes and cigars every year. Space expenditures will soon rise some more, from 40 cents per person per week to more than 50 cents a week for every man, woman, and child in the United States. For we have given this program a high national priority, even though I realize that this is, in some measure, an act of faith and vision, for we do not now know what benefits await us. But if I were to say, my fellow citizens, that we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field,
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this decade is out, then we must be bold. I'm the one who's doing all the work, so we just want you to stay cool for a minute. However, I think we're going to do it. And I think that we must pay what needs to be paid. I don't think we ought to waste any money, but I think we ought to do the job. And this will be done in the decade of the 60s. It may be done while some of you are still here at school at this college and university. It will be done during the terms of office of some of the people who sit here on this platform. But it will be done. And it will be done before the end of this decade. And I am delighted that this university is playing a part in putting a man on the moon as part of a great national effort of the United States of America. Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Just got a couple minutes left here on the show today, but if you missed it, the big story this morning was out of Pope County, Arkansas. The county judge there, Jim Ed Gibson, has issued a letter saying if a license is issued for a casino in Pope County, Arkansas, I give my support for Gulfside Casino Partnership. And we had on at 7 o'clock Anna Steertz, an attorney who has filed a lawsuit to stop that because the people of Pope County voted overwhelmingly on a county ordinance saying, hey, you can't issue a letter of support without first having a vote of the people. This letter seeming to be in direct contradiction to the will of the people of Pope County. So if you missed that interview, go over to conduitnews.com to get caught up on that. But as we close out the show today, I just wanted to thank Paul for allowing me to step in for him today here on Conduit News Radio. And just wanted to encourage people to keep listening. I wanted to wish everyone a happy new year. Paul will be back on Wednesday, January 2nd. That's next Wednesday on January 2nd in the new year. The legislative session will begin January 14th. And in 2019, Conduit News will be the place to learn what is going on in your name at the Marble Palace in Little Rock. You can get live updates and live shows from Little Rock with Paul Harrell. Conduit News will be teaming up again with Conduit for Action for weekly scorecards, tracking legislation affecting your economic freedom here in Arkansas and your individual liberty. I will tell you the full story on taxes. So subscribe now over at conduitnews.com. Turn on the live notifications on the Facebook Conduit News page so you can get the latest in what is happening. So want to thank everyone for tuning in today. It is Johnny Cash Friday, so we'll listen to some Johnny Cash music as we end the show today. We will not. Oh, I'm sorry. We will not be playing Johnny Cash. We don't have that, but want to wish everyone a happy weekend. A big weekend of football coming up. I know I'll be watching the playoff games tomorrow. I think Alabama's the team to beat right now, and then got a lot of playoff implications coming up. But stay tuned to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul today. Everyone have a great new year.